Hi everyone. So as the result of a question someone asked in an earlier video of mine, which I will link in the description below, I've decided to do a strong medium wave test with a number of digital and analog radios. And I'm going to use this digital voice recorder, which isn't ideal, but it's what I've got, to record the audio, so we won't be taking into account the speaker of any of these radios. If the radios have a tone control, it will be set to high or normal. And, well, let me run through the radios and explain why I've chosen them, and then we'll get right to it. So, in terms of the digital radios, there's the Tecsun PL-330. Not much to say about it that I haven't said already. There's the Sangean ATS9009x2. Not too much to say about that either, really. Those are both DSP-based radios, and that means that they digitize the signal and do a lot of the analysis, or the work that a radio has to do to capture a signal in a digital chip. That makes them tremendously sensitive, but it also makes them different. The Sangean has a line out, which I'll use for this purpose. That probably circumvents the tone controls. The other radio I'll use here is a Grundig YB300PE. I've also looked at this radio before. I'll probably put a link to that in the description as well. This radio works fine, except I think the speaker has gotten wet at some point and doesn't sound so great, but that's not going to matter for this purpose because we'll be going out the audio. That's different, and the reason it's included is that's a PLL-based receiver. So that means, while it has a digital frequency control, the radio itself is essentially an analog radio inside. So the detector, all that sort of stuff, that's all analog. So on the other side, we have the Tecsun R-9700DX, which is an analog radio. Pretty decent one, actually. I quite like that. We have, let me get the model number on this. So this is a modern, I just bought this last year, the year before, dual conversion radio. We have this GE from the late 70s or possibly early 80s. This is an IC-based radio. I think it has discrete output transistors, though. And its model is 7-72857A. I've done a look inside video of this one, so I will post a link to that. And then finally, this radio, which I really like, is a Sony ICF-7370W. W maybe stands for white. I don't know. It's beige. I quite like this radio. This does claim to have, well, I'll tell you what it claims on the outside. It claims it has one FET, so one field effect transistor, one IC, which I can't see in a brief look inside it, so I don't know what that's doing, and 9 transistors. So, you know, obviously there is an IC in there because it's missing some transistors, which you would expect with this sort of radio. Maybe it's got an maybe related to the FM detection or something. Anyway, this is an early to mid 70s radio. I quite like this. This is fairly sensitive. So these radios that have tone controls will set the tone control all the way to high for this purpose. So I'm going to stop, get set up. I'll record about 20 seconds of each of them, and then I'll overlay the audio and try to get the volume about the same on each of them, which may be a little tough, but we'll see how that works. And then afterward, maybe I'll have something to say. Or maybe I'll just leave it for you guys to reach whatever interpretations you like or not. The real issue here is whether the style of radio matters, right? You know, does a PLL radio sound different from a from a DSP radio? Do they sound different from the analog radios? And is there a difference between the sort of vintage radios and and a more recent one? And some of that might just have to do with taste and how people have decided they like the radios tuned to sound. I wanted to get the speakers and the audio output stage out of it as much as possible. For the recorder, this is a voice recorder, so again, it's not ideal, but connecting directly to the computer, I don't have a proper audio interface, so that was generating a lot of odd noises and overloading, and I decided not to go with that. I've turned off all the filters in this, but it still has auto gain control. However, I don't think for standard North American AM medium wave broadcast that's going to be an issue. Okay, so let me start recording this stuff and I will get back to you. Here's the Tecsun PL-330.
Together behind the NDP this time.
Tomorrow, vote Liberal.
We're checking in with the candidates on the final day on the campaign trail.
It's June, which means Pride is officially underway.
Come prepared to have a good time.
The month-long celebration kicks off with the flag raising at City Hall.
Those Blue Jays are hot, looking to extend a season-high winning streak while on the ice.
It's only going to continue to increase.
So now here's the Sangean. We'll turn down the volume because the output port does not shut down the sound, and now we'll turn this on. Record.
Winning start to the day, although it continues to bounce off its low for the day. Gold right now higher by $3, $18.52, and then oil is up $2.37 to $117.03. Now shares in the parent company of Tim Hortons Restaurant Brands International down by about 1% on Bay Street. Federal and provincial privacy watch.
Okay, and that's that one. Okay, so now here's the Grundig. Same deal.
Thing. You left the car at home. Thank you. But even though you slept, do you think you're okay to drive? If you drank a lot the night before, you could still be intoxicated. Only time, not a cold shower, a hot coffee, or a big meal can lower your blood alcohol concentration. Plan ahead for your night out and the next morning. You'll be helping to keep our roads safe.
It has taken a few tries to get the volume right for the recorder, but let's give this one more try. This is the Tecsun analog radio, the R-9700DX.
And Niagara Falls. Our meteorologist Carl Lamb says the storms are ahead of the cold front.
And once we head into the afternoon, we're cooling down those temperatures, but the humidity still is not out of here. The cold front has to make its way through tonight, and once it does, it unlocks more refreshing air headed into the GTA. So tomorrow, temperatures will be right around 20 degrees.
Yeah, so I'm redoing the recording of the GE because it looked like we might have been up against the limiter built into this little recorder. So let's hit record. That won't work because I put the hold switch on by accident. Okay, let's try again.
3115.
City News Time, 1:51.
Time for traffic and weather together all the ones. Here's Carrie Prunskis.
This report is brought to you by LL Bean. Westbound 401 from Brock Road to approaching Port Union. Express lanes are still closed, and this is for truck fire cleanup. This has been an issue since the overnight hours, so it's jam-packed on the westbound 401 as you approach.
All right, and the final radio is the Sony.
Campaigning in Toronto. The only way to stop the Ford Conservatives is to vote Liberal in this election.
NDP leader Horvath in Brampton.
This time, the way to make sure Doug Ford is not in the Premier's chair after tomorrow night is that we all come together behind the NDP.
Can you tell us why you chose not to bring up issues like the cutting of Toronto City Council, the use of the notwithstanding clause, and the attempted appointment of...
And I will go do something with these audio clips and see if we can make it into something that allows us to compare the 6 radios to each other. So as we scan through what I think are our top 3 prospects, which radio do I think won the medium wave AM shootout thing? Well, let's start with the digital radios. In many ways, the Tecsun did best. It's got a wider bandwidth. In fact, that's in the specs. So it has better high-frequency response. I mean, it sounds, you know, as close to hi-fi as you can get on AM, really. The Sangean has maybe a little bit of noise in there, maybe. And it certainly doesn't do quite as well in the high-end response. So I think you'd have to, on those grounds, give the nod to the Tecsun, just in terms of audio quality, which is the only criterion that we're using today. However, in practice, the Sangean has a far better speaker than the Tecsun. And if you're going to listen to either of these radios, unless the portability of the Tecsun wins, you're going to pick the Sangean every time. Unfortunately, the Grundig sounds a bit harsh to my ears. There's no low end. I kind of feel that there's still something wrong with it. I thought the speaker was the problem, but I'm now thinking that one of these days maybe I'll go change every capacitor in it. And there are a lot of capacitors in that radio. So I think the Tecsun probably wins. It's the one you'd probably want to plug into your hi-fi system. But as a regular radio to listen to, the Sangean wins. Now, when it comes to the analog radios, I think there's no question. Sony wins every time. It's got way more top end. Both of the other radios, the Tecsun and the GE, sounded anemic, chesty. They sounded pleasant in the way that we think of old radios sounding, but there was no high end there at all. Sony sounded just about as good as these two, I think. And I think the Sony was, I think the Sony's a very pleasant sounding radio, and I was quite impressed with its sound directly. So if I had to choose a radio to take out on the deck to use for the ball game, which of these three would I choose? When it comes to the audio quality when connected to a recorder, I think the Tecsun is better, but I think for monaural AM, it's, well, obviously none of these do stereo AM, and there's no stereo AM in Toronto, and I don't believe in Canada at the moment at all. It actually comes down to the speakers, and the pleasantest sounding speakers are on these two. Unfortunately, the Tecsun is essentially a pocket radio size speaker, and it sounds like a pocket radio. And to be honest, I've got better sounding pocket radios than the Tecsun if it comes right down to it. The Tecsun is optimized for making shortwave stations understandable. It's got a big peak in the upper mid-range and the vocal range, and that's what it's designed to do. The Sangean has some adjustment, which allows you to muck around with those parameters. And of course, the Sony has a traditional tone control and doesn't care about that. It's just designed to sound as good as the engineers who manufactured it thought it could. So I think the Sony wins on those grounds every time. I think the Sony is the pleasantest of these three radios to just listen to, say, a ball game or talk radio on. When it comes down to music, the Sangean, even though it has a smaller speaker, it's got some digital signal processing in the output. It's a pretty good sounding radio for, a 3.5 inch speaker, whatever it is. I would also say that the GE is a pretty nice radio to use for that kind of purpose as well. It's got no high end in AM at all, but it's pleasant, it's warm, it's really kind of hard to complain about. And I really quite like the Analogue Tecsun as well, but there's no question that the Sony is the better radio of those three. So these are, I think, the three winners by a fairly substantial margin, and I'm happy to own them. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed my little discussion of what these radios sound like, If you disagree or agree or have a different feeling about which video, or which radio I mean, sounded better, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks so much.